revenue architect, also a helicopter pilot. That's new for us. We never had something like that. And it's Rowie. Rowie and Romeo will talk today with you about GTM Ops. Welcome to the show, Rowie. Before we get into things, I would love to just kick off a bit with who is winning by design, who is Rowie, and what is top of mind for you today, and what we will talk about today in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Let's just give a initial kickoff.
All right. Cool. Thank you, Romeo. Thank you for having me. Maybe I'll start off winning by design. Winning by design, we are a sales consultant or a go-to-market consultant and training company based out of the US. We work with B2B recurring revenue businesses. We help them build, improve, and scale their go-to-market activities by creating playbooks and processes, implementing all of those into the teams and the processes. And one of those aspects is also training. So we also augment that with trainings for the different ICs and the management level.
I love winning by design. I must say I love the bow tie. I did also the revenue architecture certification.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that with a lovely lady on customer ops.
Yeah.
I forgot her name.
Yeah.
Uh, but and the books, because now you also like your founder is from Netherlands, right?
Originally, yeah, but now
Yeah, very hard name to pronounce.
Jaco.
Yeah, but I think in Dutch is a different way of
Yeah,
pronunciation,
yeah,
right?
of course, of course. Yeah,
Jaco, yeah.
yeah,
Very energetic guy, and I mean everything that you guys do in Winning by Design, it's amazing. So I would love to hear a bit also your experience and
yeah,
how you got to do what you do before we go into all the topics.
yeah. So Jaco's vision, Jaco is like the founder of Winning by Design, and his vision is to create a standard operating model for recurring revenue businesses. So to become the ISO 9000, if you would say. So
Mm,
back in the 50s, there were no standards and no rules on how to build and operate manufacturing companies. So along came this organization and introduced ISO 9000.
mm-hmm,
That's what we're trying to do in recurring revenue businesses. When you think of it, there are no real guidelines. There are no real procedures, no tools that allow us to understand what is the right go-to-market strategy and how to implement that. Everything that we are
mm,
doing, we either heard it by somebody who successfully did it in a certain company and we try to replicate that, or we might implement the tool and just do what the tool allows us to do there. We're trying to fix that using models and scientific principles, introducing those concepts on how to really build a go-to-market organization. Because when you think of it, back in 21, 1% out of 100 companies that raised a seed round actually
mm,
made it to an IPO. And that was the good days.
mm,
Nowadays, the numbers are, maybe we'll talk about what's happening right now, but nowadays the numbers are even more terrible. Now, we will not be able to fix the product, but we will be able to increase the likelihood of companies not failing because of wrong go-to-market motions. And that would really stood out for me. So I have a sales background. I used to do enterprise sales, started climbing my way, um, and then I was introduced. I think it was like 5 years ago. I started to read the books, Jocko's books, and I really liked implementing that. And almost 3 years ago, when I saw an opening at Winning by Design and inviting us to become revenue architects or consultants, I just reached out, and yeah, that's what I've been doing
mm.
ever since.
So what does a revenue architect do in the Winning by Design methodology, let's say?
Yeah,
Because I suppose in different companies it's different thing, right?
yeah, exactly. So in our company, we diagnose. So we help high growth rate companies in the B2B recurring revenue space, design and improve their go-to-market strategies. It's to start off with where the revenue architects diagnosed the situation. So basically, going in and doing a report on what's working well, what needs to be improved, what needs to be changed, and then we go into the design phase. In the design phase, we actually build those processes. Okay, this is what is the right sales process to you. This is how you do proper customer success, and this is how your team is supposed to um, be structured in order to facilitate the right
Mm-hmm.
kind of customers that you're going. And at the end of the day, this is how much revenue, or this is the growth trajectory if you just follow those steps, assuming that everything else will fall into place. And then we do a rollout, right? It's all about change management, which obviously is the hard part. When you go into these types of companies, anywhere between 10 million all the way, I think my biggest client was north of 1.5 billion in revenue or
Mm-hmm.
bookings at that specific company. um, Change is massive. It takes months
Yeah.
over months, and it takes
So,
small changes until everything sticks. So that's the
so,
last
so,
part, which is usually the more challenging part.
so I wonder, like, at what point do companies say, "Hey, we need revenue architects"? Like, how do they realize this? Is like, or what
So
needs to happen, like in that company, so that
yeah. So
uh,
back in the good old days, I'm talking like 2020, 21, when
uh-huh.
everybody was happy and everybody was successful. Companies used to come to us and say, "Hey, we grew too fast. We're at 50 or 100 million ARR, but we don't have processes. And now we're hiring
Mm-hmm.
like crazy. We just closed our Series D, and we need to double our headcount, but we don't have a process to teach them, and we cannot continue like that." So that was the
Mm,
good old days. Nowadays, it sounds a bit different. It sounds
mm-hmm.
like usually the growth stagnated, and when the product is still the same, the product is still good. So they come to us and say, "Okay, we have a problem with our go-to-market strategy." When the market was great, everybody was buying, everybody was spending, everybody was happy. You didn't really need to have a good process in place, and I might also say you didn't even have to have good sellers, because in a lot of cases the product was so good, and basically it sold itself.
Mm,
Nowadays, all right, people budget is tight. Nobody's spending. A lot of customers are churning. All of a sudden, oh, we need to really work on the efficiency of the team, the productivity, and there are other things, in fact, that we need to take into consideration, such as cost and burn rate, etc. Not being able to raise capital, etc. But this is like the main use cases for us right now. It's like, okay, help us fix what's not working.
so is it like what happened in the automotive industry with the Six Sigma and with the manufacturing, that you need to have some kind of standardized process that makes sure that you have high efficiency, meaning high output for the input that you're having, right? So,
Exactly. So it's interesting you're saying input and output, because this is something that we talk about. So we look at the go-to-market team as a revenue factory.
mm,
So, and when you
mm-hmm,
think of it, in a factory, you have a bunch of systems or machines, and each machine has an input through output, and then like the output. And that's how we look at this. So we look at each team, each go-to-market motion as its own machine, and then we look to optimize the ratio between the input and output. So that's exactly how we do that. A lot of our work is number crunching. So we love, our revenue architects are very analytical. We always start off in analyzing the data, what's working and what's not. So we're really focused on that and creating a very scientific uh, data focused approach in solving those
mm-hmm,
problems.
mm-hmm. Okay, so we have that clear. At what stage we could say that, okay, a company would need a revenue architect, like, and then we can go into GTM ops. But just want to make sure we clearly understand what winning by design does and
Yeah,
what is a revenue architect and how does it sit in this GTM ops. So at what stage or what how big should I be as a as not necessarily SaaS company, right? As you said, is just another method of B2B recurring revenue, right?
yeah,
But what was the size? Like, do I need to have, I don't know, five sales guys at least? Do I need to have X amount of traffic?
yeah,
My contract value needs to be, I don't know, 100K ARR. What are some of the criterias?
yeah. So it's pretty simple. As soon as you have product market fit, you need a revenue architect. But what I
Mm-hmm.
mean a revenue architect, you don't need me to come into your company and tell you what to do.
Mm,
A revenue architect is understanding the principles. So we teach everything that we know. We have courses, and the last book that Jaco published was around revenue architects. So basically, everything that we know, we want the industry also to know. And
yeah,
like you
that's
said, if you
nice
took
to
that
know.
course, like we encourage everybody to come in and learn what we're actually trying to build. Because yeah, as soon as there's a go to market fit, we believe that you need to start architecting the right go to market strategy.
That's a so let's dissect a bit that because there is a lot of confusion is in how do I know that I have go to market fit?
All right.
What needs to happen in my company? I know it's a big one,
Yeah,
but
it's the classical question, right? It,
yeah, yeah.
it depends who you ask. So if you ask, let's say,
Let's have some examples.
all right, an investor, when you ask a Series A investor, what's go to market fit for him?
Hmm.
Sorry, product market fit for him. What would he say or she say?
I don't know. I suppose whenever they have X amount of customers, right?
All right, either 20 customers, assuming like you're mid
Yeah,
market, and $1 million in ARR.
yeah.
When you ask a founder, how
Hmm.
did she know that she found that product market fit? She said, I don't know, you just feel it. It's like riding a wave. It's like, for those
Okay.
of you who surf, as soon as you catch the wave, all right, you know that you catch the wave. But what happens before? It's like, okay, it's shaky, I don't know. But then, all right, everything smooth. What we like to say is that you start to see commonalities. You start to see
Hmm.
similar patterns. So the
Okay.
ACV starts to you're starting to close the same type of customers, same average ACVs. The sales cycles are
Makes
becoming
sense.
similar, right? And there's a lot of okay, I start to see common metrics, common measures across the deals that I'm closing. And another element is also retention. When you start to see that your customers are they have they have they chose to renew with you, that's another great indication. However, that's not always possible because, yeah, you probably need to wait a year to see who's renewing with you. And sometimes you might say that, okay, my average contract length or the duration is long, but I can still feel that I have that product market fit.
Okay, so that's product market fit, and then there is a lot of discussion about go to market fit,
Yeah,
right? What would be the difference and what's that element? Is it like, let's say, I don't know, as SDR and AE work together perfectly, and we are closing a bunch of deals, right? Like the two two sales motion, right?
yeah,
Or is it like, I don't know, only inbound and AE?
yeah.
That's work like product led growth. That's working well. Or how is it
So it
from
doesn't
your definition?
from our definition, it doesn't matter what go-to-market motion you choose, whether it's two-stage, one-stage, whether it's PLG or enterprise. It doesn't matter. Product market fit usually happens around that 1 to 3 million. Go to market fit usually takes happens around 10 to 15 million.
Uh-huh.
A good indication of go to market fit is you have a repeatable process. A repeatable
Mm-hmm.
process, whether it doesn't matter again if you have a two stage or whatever, but you're able to bring in usually, let's say, leads on one end, you follow the same process, and the outcome is relatively similar. So you
Mm-hmm.
have a repeatable process, and you are in a position to say, okay, I want to scale. I want to bring another team of SDR and AE. If I could just bring them, onboard them, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
process that they can follow, and they can follow the same process. If you're at that stage,
Correct.
you found your go to market fit.
Okay. Now, um, that's very clear. Now let's do the following, just for us to take it very methodically and with examples, right? Let's understand like GTM ops, like let's like a 101
Hmm.
basic one, and like build a roadmap or how you build the GTM ops,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But let's do two use cases and we can switch from one to another. One is the obvious B2B SaaS, which is doesn't need any explanation. And the other one is professional services, right? Where you might do consulting, you might do, I don't know, a lot of companies here in Poland and this area, they do developers like software houses, IT outsourcing type
Hmm.
of services. I don't know. Like usually all of these business services have a similar uh, contract value around 300K would be for a professional service in the IT sector per year, and for a SaaS, let's say, I don't know, 30K ARR,
Yeah,
right? Like that's, I suppose, a good benchmark.
yeah.
And I wanted to give you this case studies or example of companies so we have a clear direction,
Hmm.
and also because majority of the listeners are either from B2B SaaS or from this professional services, so
Yeah,
they can learn a lot from this use case.
yeah.
So we are, let's say, we have product market fit in a professional service. I suppose a different way to get product market fit, but let's say we are talking about mature companies like 10, 15 years in the market. They already have big enterprises that they worked with, and the B2B SaaS, they are Series B. They had product market fit. They already have. They are not UiPath. They are not like, I don't know. They didn't do IPO. They are far away from IPO. They are just starting to grow. They are in 2024, so you have the crisis, you have the churn, you have the all the situation what's happening today. um, Enterprises try to consolidate technologies. They don't want any more bunch of tools, so we have that. So in this situation today, how do we get started with GTM ops? What would be like a first step for any company, like a board, or working with a revenue architect, not necessarily you, but anyone, maybe they have someone internal, to get started with GTM ops? What could be the first thing to do? Would it be an audit? Would it be a mapping of the team, or how do we get started?
So I would like to say that we first of all like to define a unified data model.
Okay.
And a data model is our way to actually map the customer journey
Mm-hmm.
and be able to break it down into different stages and measure the input and output of each one of those stages. So you mentioned the bow tie. For those of you who don't know, you can Google this up. But winning by design bow tie, we took the customer journey and we broke it down into acquisition, right? Acquisition is the marketing. If you have like a lead generation, SDRs doing outbound and AEs, and also post sale. This is the right side of the bow tie. And the right side of the bow tie is the onboarding, the retention, and expansion. This is usually the customer success, account management kind of world. Let's create a let's make sure that we all understand what we're looking at and we're able to capture that data, because you can't do an audit before you have the ability to read the data. You can't know what you need to focus on if you don't have the data. So this is step number one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Once you have that, you can start doing and understanding where are your gaps at. All right, so I see that the numbers are, we like to benchmark a lot, benchmark to industry and ourselves. And we see, let's take the most obvious example, we have a problem with onboarding, right? If we're talking about SaaS and onboarding is unsuccessful. So once I have the data
Mm-hmm.
and I can actually see, all right, one out of every five accounts are stuck at onboarding because whatever it is, I have a problem there. I need to start fixing it.
Mm-hmm.
And don't expect to be able to come in and like change everything. We're talking about small incremental changes. This is how we get improvement. Small
Mm-hmm.
companies and big companies. By the way, I always get this question about data model, and people think that, okay, I'm a small company, I don't have the resources. It's probably easier for larger companies that have a RevOps team or a GTM Ops team of 15 people. It's much easier for them to do. But on the flip side, it's much easier for smaller companies to do that. It doesn't require a lot of resources. Then to implement the data model for a company of 100 million ARR with a few hundred people in the go-to-market team, that's very difficult then to implement that. So as soon as possible, create the data model, make sure that everybody looks at the same data, and then based on data, understand where you need to start improving and introducing new processes or fixing problems that you have, whether it's in the GTM or the product. So I think that's the most
Mm-hmm.
important part.
And you in this data model, you do also qualitative uh, type of research, or we only need pure data? I'm asking this because mm, a SaaS company might have more data than a professional service, right?
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the business. So I suppose you could um, get some kind of more information if you interview some sales guys, customers, so on, to understand better what's happening in case the data is not there.
Oh, of course, and even if you have the data, you always need to add some colors
Mm-hmm.
in there, because the data itself, you need to dive deeper into really understand what's going on. So of course, those types of interviews and looking at the enablement and the process that is currently being done at the company and followed by the commercial team, of course, that needs to come. But again, we like to start off when we do into the diligence on a company. We start off in looking at the data, unbiased, and then we, based on the data, and we know where to start digging and asking questions. So we always start with the data. But
So how much time does it take usually to
4 to
gather?
6 weeks.
Okay, okay.
They
And there is, I'm asking, is there patience from the business side, or how do we need to do a training to? I'm trying to get as real as possible because I think it's important for everyone to understand how do we do the buy-in? Like, do we need to do a training for the board on, hey, this is what we will do, this is the whole model that we will run, these are the milestones, this is why we need to do it? Because if not, it's like, yeah, you are just 6 months we are paying and then no improvements, right?
absolutely right. And you're going into like the entire change management aspects of
Mm,
it's any consultant, right, that comes in and tries to do that change management. And you're right. One of the key elements is to start from the top. If you don't have that executive sponsor or sponsorship, most likely your product project will fail. Your change, what you're trying to implement, will change. And
mm-hmm.
we insist on having that type of engagement with executives. Again, you know, in a $1.5 billion company, you can't always have access to the CEO or talk to the CRO as much
Of
as you
course, of
like.
course.
But yeah, we try to do that, and we help them by feeding them with communication messages that we want them to tell the teams, because if it comes from the top dog,
Mm-hmm.
then everybody lines up and listens. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We usually start off and having that executive alignment, do our analysis, come back with our findings, and then we, in a lot of cases, because our recommendations are based on data, we do get their at least understanding, or they do agree with what we're saying. It's not always possible to do changes because of course there are other factors in place that we do not know. Like if we're saying, hey, launch a new go to market motion, and that requires
Yeah, politics might also be there, right?
exactly,
So
exactly, yeah.
yeah, yeah, of course, of course. Okay,
but,
but
but
what we are interested in more is the process, right? So we do the initial executive alignment, we do the findings, the data, we go back, we show that to the executives. The decision is made. You they have the recommendation. Decision is made. Okay, let's focus on these bottlenecks,
yeah,
right?
and we do
And
that
then
by
what's next?
the classical 2x2, right? I think it's the BCG 2x2. Like what's
Okay.
easiest, what's harder, and what's faster
Mm-hmm.
and what's slower, and you basically pick the top right.
Like prioritization metrics, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, got it.
And we do
So
that,
you, mm-hmm,
and then we basically follow the same principles of project management kind of thing. So we actually have a okay, this is what we're doing. This is the change that we're launching in July. So that's taking place here. Of course, this is where training comes in because everything that you so our changes usually revolve around three things. It's people that we need to upskill or introduce new processes.
mm-hmm,
It's processes that we need to design them. So maybe our recommendation
mm-hmm,
is to introduce a new process, so we need to design that. And of course, tools. Right. So
mm-hmm.
our tools, especially in our world, everything needs to be reflected in the tools that we're using. So coming back to
Got it.
okay, implementation plan, we have a project, we have a sub project, we want to implement this, and usually we focus on those three elements. Okay, we need to train the people, we need to design the new process, and we then need to implement that in the tools. So this is how we do that, chunk by chunk, depending on how much appetite the organization has for changes, because sometimes when they're a large organization, we can work in parallel with the customer success team, the marketing team, and the sales team, and we're doing multiple initiatives at once. Smaller companies, we can probably just focus on one thing at a time,
Okay.
a quarter at a month, whatever the sequence
So
is.
so we choose the initiatives, we have that in place. As you mentioned, the appetite. I suppose this appetite, it's a feedback from the executives, right? Or how do we know? Okay. So, and how do we implement this initiative? So, I suppose for each initiatives, you might have different people, you might have different process, you might have different tools, as you
Yeah,
said, right?
yeah.
So, mm, what are the steps in this case? We need to choose a team. It, we need to set up sprints. There needs to be an outcome there. How do we actually execute it?
All right, so going deeper, we actually call them sprints, yes, and
Uh huh.
taken from the agile and Six Sigma and all that. So we focus on sprints. And
Okay.
large organization, we just focus on a domino. We call it a domino team. So
Domino team.
yeah,
Okay.
we prove that one team can actually do that, and we want to show improvement until we roll it out to the rest of the organization. But let's say doesn't matter if it's a domino team or
So
doing
this is like ambassadors or
yes,
like
yes.
your okay. Mm-hmm. Got
We
it.
take usually we take the stronger teams
Mm-hmm.
because there it's easier, of course, to introduce the change, and Once they prove that there's a positive impact, then we roll out to the rest of the team. But we do sprints, right? Exactly as you said. And a
Mm-hmm.
sprint, if we want to go deeper, we have like a package that like we come in, do 3 weeks of design, and then the rest of the 4 weeks. Usually it's like a 2 month, but let's say 4 weeks of design, 4 weeks of trainings in which we train both the frontline managers, because they're, maybe we want to talk about this, they are our ambassadors of change. And then we train the ICs together with the frontline managers and guide them how to coach their teams in
For
parallel
for for that initiatives, yeah.
for that specific initiative. And the
Okay,
smaller the initiative is, the more successful it is, right? Because
of course.
if we're focusing on let's do negotiation, let's improve our negotiation skills, that's usually quite simple, it's fast. Um, yeah, so if we need to do something in the tools, it happens in parallel. And of course, everything needs to be measured, because we are all measured on impact and the positive impact that we bring.
Mm-hmm.
So if,
Mm-hmm.
say, for example, we wanted to tackle discount rates, so we measured the discounts at point 0. After the end of the sprint, which is each month, we usually don't see a lot of really hard indications, but you do have those soft indications that it's working. Usually, you hear it from the field. Hey, I managed to implement this strategy or this process, and was able to close that deal. Blah blah blah. But then we, depending on what, but usually we come back there after a month or two and start to measure it, and we start to see the improvement as it gradually increases.
So you were saying that you do the training and measurement, but in parallel, there was something you wanted to say.
The tools,
The tools.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. So you're selecting the tools, or you're implementing the tools, or how?
So again, the sprints are usually more. Uh, it's a more. It's a narrow,
Mm-hmm.
scope. So we don't need to choose tools. Usually, it's like, okay, they have the tools in place. Let's just modify it to reflect the new
To that
process
initiative.
that we want
Okay,
to reflect. But when we're doing
got it.
bigger, okay, we want to introduce a outbound process. Of course, it takes longer. We need to choose the right tool, the outbound tools, sales loft, outreach, mix match, all these. Let's
Mm-hmm.
find a vendor. Let's start using it, educate everybody. That's a longer process, of course.
Okay. So essentially, and then we can go to the next steps. But the revenue architect, just to go back, is the one that is coordinating these teams, right? Or is facilitating the sprints. So that means it's like a scrum master, let's say,
Yes,
right?
yes. That's how we see
Okay.
ourselves. And again, in this specific context, when
Hmm.
you think of it, there is no such thing as a revenue architect in companies.
Yeah.
And you're right to say that the most, the closest thing maybe is GTM Ops, because they
Hmm.
have that wide visibility on everything that is happening in the company. But to add, this is very operational level. We believe that the revenue architect also brings in the strategy level, the very high level strategic
Hmm.
kind of planning. So yeah, so that's the revenue architect, and there's no one currently that is doing this. It's some organization, we start to see them in organization. They call them um, GTM strategy lead.
Hmm.
Sometimes the COO does that. Sometimes the enablement, chief of staff, those sort of, and again, they do other things as well, but they also are responsible in some cases for that specific topic.
You know how I see this? Like I love the process, but and we do RevOps in HubSpot. We do similar things, but strictly with HubSpot. But I did a lot of conversion rate optimization for e-commerces.
Hmm. Hmm.
So conversion rate optimization back in the day, um, 2016, it was very new, right? And the idea was to, maybe it's a little bit simple, because you need to come up with hypotheses. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you were coming up with like hypotheses that, okay, if we if we put socks as a next item to buy after shoes, then we can raise the CLV, or the basket value
Yeah.
overall, right?
Yeah.
So it was everything about sprints, right? So we get like, okay, let's come up with the hypotheses. Let's have those metrics of prioritization. And then we look at what can bring the highest revenue. In e-commerce, it's faster because you have a bunch of, like, you need to have a bunch of traffic, so you see really fast the results, right?
Yeah.
And I'm talking about experiments like, let's say you are in skincare beauty, right? And you're selling eyelashes or whatever, and they buy the eyelashes, but maybe you run a survey, and you ask the color of the eye, simple. And then based on the color of the eye and the eyelashes they selected, now you can recommend something else,
Yeah.
right? So that's a hypothesis, maybe works or not.
Yeah.
So I suppose that how you guys run it and how you explain it, and we also have a very similar approach. Um, but that's the easiest way, right? Because you have very clear outcome that you want to
Yeah.
have.
Hmm.
So give us some examples of how I gave you the examples of eyelashes with color of the eye. What are the most common initial initial initiatives that you guys see within the organizations that you work with, like, just for us to understand, do we as companies and listeners of this podcast have similar problems
Yeah.
that the companies that respectable consulting company like Winning by Design is
Yeah. So I think
going.
actually before I answer that, the same thing goes for PLG.
Yeah, exactly.
And PLG, we consider that as as a one type of go-to-market motion out of a few that we can choose. So PLG is, when you look at the ACV, of course, it's the lowest ACV, and this is PLG. And PLG, you still do that hypothesis squads or growth teams, or
Yes,
let's
yes, yes, yes.
bring and test this and let's see what how we
The
change.
Spotify style,
Yeah,
right?
exactly that. But back to your question, I think the challenges that we see are and across the board, and it will not come as a surprise. First of all, everybody's struggling with pipeline, especially nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
The pipeline is not big enough. How do we increase our pipeline? Do we and sometimes companies come to us and say, okay, we want to go enterprise because we believe that higher ACVs will, we don't have enough pipeline, and if we just close two deals, it's the same equivalent of 10 deals for mid-market. Of course, that's not how you do that. You need to actually understand what is the implications of selling into enterprise. Same things that we hear sometimes, okay, let's introduce the PLG motion and let's start creating pipeline from free users, etc. Of course, there's a lot of other things to consider. So pipeline is the first thing. Second thing is win rate. Of course, we
Mm-hmm.
all have suffered, and our statistics said that win rate now it's bouncing up a bit, but in the let's say a year ago, on average, it dropped almost 40% across the
Yeah.
board. All our companies came to us. Okay, we were at like 20 um, back in 21, 22. Now we're at 12, at 9, depending on the region. So
Mm.
everybody's struggling with the win rate. Um, that's one thing. Discount rate, I give that as an example. We see a lot of companies giving away a lot of discount because, okay, we have a weak pipeline, we're not closing as much as possible. And all right, if I just give a bit more discount, I might be able to close them. It might be right for service companies, but in
Mm.
B2B recurring software companies, the the connection between the win rate and the discount rate is relatively weak.
Mm-hmm.
So we did an analysis and we tried to see how the correlation between how much discount and the win rate, and we saw that there's a very weak connection, not as much as we think. So at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
we're giving out this discount just because we're not doing negotiation good enough, and our sellers are not doing that good enough. So that's something.
It's like always the seller's curse, right? Like
Yeah,
when you uh, have an challenges with negotiation,
yeah,
that's
yeah, and you don't know how to properly negotiate. And of course, the last one is retention. And retention usually comes because companies don't have proper CS processes. We're
mm,
all very focused on acquisition, on sales, on acquisition part. We don't look at retention. But in recurring revenue businesses, revenue comes from keeping our customers and retaining, right? We're not making any money
yeah,
at the first year. That's why we
the
need to.
right side of the bow tie, how you
Exactly.
guys say it. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. We say that recurring revenue is the result of recurring impact. Recurring
yeah.
impact is where our customers keep on renewing with us. And what we see a lot is that companies either don't have the right, it's usually they don't have the right processes in place to support those existing customers.
Hmm. And I'm curious because we talked about patterns, right? So you guys saw what happened in the golden age or golden
Yeah.
era,
Yeah.
and now. So, what are some patterns that you guys see that happened in the golden era that helps companies now?
Helps.
Yeah, like they did it really well then, right? And because they did it well then. Now they don't suffer that much.
Yeah.
AKA pipeline, it's still healthy because we didn't invest necessarily in SDR,
Yeah.
but we invested in inbound and organic social
Yeah.
as an example, right? Like, because what we see is that companies, especially in IT outsourcing, they were really living in a golden era, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there was such a big demand for developers. And they were doing the geo arbitrage, right? Which was pretty easy.
Yeah.
Hire in Ukraine, Poland,
Yeah.
with VCs and money from US.
Yeah.
Typical arbitrage, right? Now they even didn't need to do sales, right? Like they just got leads in, like forms were filled in from SEO, right? With terms like I'm not kidding, like we are talking about uh, you know, six-figure deals coming from
And
best software houses in Poland, right? Best software houses in Python,
yeah.
whatever, right? Like it's like, and now those people are like, what the hell do I need to give money for sales and CRMs? And it's like a different
Yeah.
dimension, right? So what we saw is that, and we did a study about this. We saw that okay, whoever did very good social and very good SEO and events and so on. So it's like a more holistic thing, like not just one channel. Now with pipeline, of course they suffer, but they suffer less
Yeah.
than someone who only relied on SEO,
Yeah.
right? So this is what I wanted to give this context to you, so
Yeah.
you think about the actions or the patterns.
Yeah. The patterns is for earlier companies, early stage companies, is they stopped doing what did not work and focused, really focused on what does work.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably have seen that a lot. Companies in the early days try to do a lot of things. Okay, we want to sell to this segment and we want to sell to this size companies and we want until something sticks and then you start scaling that. At some point, companies mature and understand, okay, this is, I'm targeting the mid-market. That's my most successful. I'm stop supporting those individuals, those smaller micro SMBs, and I'm not going to chase after enterprise. And I'm going to tell my AEs to stop selling to enterprise because we don't know how they suck the life out of our company and services, and they demand everything. Companies in the early stage that were able to say that, everybody suffered, but they suffered less because they already
Mm-hmm.
had a path and a repeatable process that they could follow. Companies that did not do that were spread too thin. They were spending a lot of money, and those are the companies that had to let go and cut costs dramatically. The more mature companies is the companies that already focused on productivity and also took into account the cost. Back in 2021, it was all about grow at all cost, right? It was all about how fast can you grow, and the valuation of company was based on how fast they reached a certain ARR. Companies that, however, focused on the cost aspects were the ones that were hit less because they didn't have a lot of spending and they could sustain, they had longer runways and they could sustain continuing without paying too much.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are the two big differentiators.
Okay. So now when you look at GTM Ops and what you guys do, right? Like, um, what is top of mind? What are those things like? It's like besides pipeline, besides all these things, like, is it more around, okay, we need to figure out it's still the growth of all cost. It's still that's the main theme that that we have, or is it retention, or is it CLV, or how we can use AI in all these process? What is like, of course, AI. Delete that question. AI, delete it from your mind because that's the answer will be AI. So, uh, yeah. So I'm just curious to know, like, is it still let's grow, let's grow, let's grow, or is it wow, we need to do something with those customers that we already have because that's our bread and butter, and that's like what makes us money. We need to figure out customer success, like
Yeah.
that
So
needs to be done. So
it's
what is then?
something similar. But before I answer that, let's say 2020 and 21 was grow at all costs. Like
Yeah.
everybody, money was abundant. It was relatively easy to raise capital. And once you raised
Uh-huh.
capital, you went on spending that. 22, 23 was all about expense management. So basically, people cutting off and reducing their workforce force in order to extend the runway. Nowadays, we're all expected to continue to grow. So high growth, back to high growth, but with low cost. And this is what we're trying to figure out how to do that properly. I think when you're looking for a metric, I think it's all about NRR and GRR. In a recurring revenue business, it's harder. It's going to continue to be harder to acquire new customers. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we as companies need to focus on our existing customers, making sure that we're retaining them and doing as much as we can to expand our current existing customers because it comes at a fraction of a cost of acquiring new customers. So if you would ask me, this is the first place to look
Hmm.
because
And
acquisition.
do you have guys some kind of benchmarks or the X that you get the return on revenue when you fix the left side of the bow tie
We
versus the right one?
we have some numbers, but I don't know how. I can't remember just to pull them up right now. So we do have benchmarks of the current situation and also at a fraction of the cost. But by the way, it's easy to do. Like take your any company's sales and marketing spend and cost to serve and just calculate that and understand for every
Mm-hmm.
new dollar that you're generating on the right side, what is the equivalent on the left side.
Okay. So now, before we finish, because we are getting to our hour mark, what would be some recommendation to these companies that we talked about, like professional services and B2B SaaS, the use case that we had when it comes to GTM Ops today, 2024? Like, what what are those things that internally need to happen or questions that should be asked internally before even going into a discussion or any kind of change management? Yeah, because in the end, that's the what we are talking about.
Yeah. So, by the way, I did not talk a lot about professional services, but this is the company that we're at, right? Winning by Design is a professional service
Yeah,
company.
please
We're,
tell us.
expe- we're experiencing the same problems, right? We're
Uh-huh.
trying to implement what we preach, and not all fits well to a service company because retention is, of course, when we're looking at the right side, is different than recurring revenue. So we start every quarter at zero, so that's obvious. Same as these types of listeners. Um, but the first step is to understand. We call it the growth formula. Is to
Mm-hmm.
understand what is the algorithm, what's the inner workings of your company, your GTM factory, as we call it. In order to generate one customer, one win, how many MQLs do you need to generate? How many leads do you need to have in your pipeline?
Mm-hmm.
What does on average one customer bring in? Is it 20K, 40K, etc.? So that's looking at the acquisition side, and also do that for the on the right side. So that one customer, how long does do they stay with us, and what's their lifetime value? Once I have that, I can start understand. This is our way to understand the business.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to start off with that and say, okay, so I know my target for Q3, Q4 of 24 is 10 million. 10 million means I need to close 50 or 500 customers. That means that I need to generate these amounts of lead. That means that I need to spend this amount in marketing and I need to support that with the proper headcount. If you don't understand that when you plan and focus on the future, that's the only way. Most companies do a bottom up kind of approach, right? The board says,
Yeah.
okay, you need to hit 10 million, good luck. And then, okay, the CFO comes and splits. Okay, 10 millions marketing, you take two, sales, you get four, CS, you take two, and the rest is for the R&D. But
Mm-hmm.
as RevOps, as go to market ops, we need to look and understand what is the actual numbers, the conversion rates, and everything that operates that. I call it like the algorithm of that factory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's my tip.
I think that needs a lot of upskilling, right? Because to even put these questions or even know these methods, you need to know what you don't know first of all,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because uh,
Coming back to my what I said in the beginning. We don't have guidelines. Don't have rules and standards how to do that, and that's what we're trying to solve. So For those of you who are interested to learn more, there's a lot of YouTube videos of us training on those stuff. It's winning by design at on YouTube. Yeah, we're trying to teach that, and we're trying to create.
Yeah, and you had also the website, like the blueprints that you
Yeah,
have of winning by
yeah,
design. In the past, you had the science of revenue.
yeah.
Now it's redirecting to that resource pages, but I think that's a good one. So, what's the first book that one professional service company should read and one B2B SaaS company should read learning about this?
I think the new book, Revenue Architect,
Mm-hmm.
encompasses everything that we talked about today, and most of our
Okay. Because
standard.
there were like 7 books or something like this,
Yeah,
right?
there were 7 books in the
Before.
past,
Uh-huh.
but I think the new book encompasses everything together. I think,
It encompasses everything together.
yeah, and
Okay,
it's like a
perfect.
very high level strategic view of how our industry works. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it's a very good book. It's called Revenue
Okay.
Architecture.
Okay. Revenue. Yeah, I know you launched it
Yeah,
last year, I think. Or
yeah. Yeah.
cool. Cool. Okay. So thanks a lot, Roy. Like it
Thank you.
was amazing stuff. And I suppose just to go back to the helicopter pilot, as a pilot, there is always this saying like helicopter view. You
Yeah,
can really say that.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
uh, because as a revenue architect, you are having this helicopter view, but also you go down to earth and also look at the microscope.
I
So I
like
hope
that.
that
I'm going to use that.
yeah, I think you guys will hear much more about winning by design. It's a company that is giving back to the community. If you're not a pavilion member, be a pavilion member because these guys are there, and the 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 knowledge that is shared in the community is just amazing. And no better place than a community to learn about these things because, as Roy said, there's no standards. We have no idea. Like, let's be honest, we have no idea. And if we hide behind our screens, and if we hide and we are, are shy to go out there, or we are not part of this community, we are losing a lot of insights. These insights that come from other people who might already tried those things. And believe me, whatever you do in GTM is not something that can be, you know, uh, it's not like Coca-Cola recipe, right? Like people did it, people will do it. It's not like you cannot share this information,
Yeah,
right? You don't work for like CIA or FBI ops. You at the end of the day, you're trying to um, do revenue with business services or with a piece of software. Like that's the basic of it. So there is no secret in what kind of new line you found in an outbound outreach, right? Like there is no such thing. And winning by design is an example of that because all the frameworks are shared in the book, in the resources, in the YouTube channels, and in this kind of podcast like this one. So thank you, Winning by Design, for contributing this to the community. We try to make our own little impact by having guys like you here, by us filtering and sharing it with our community. So thank you a lot, Rowie, again, and we are in touch. Take
thank you.
care.
Thank you for having me.